You can skip right to the thumbnail story with the timestamps in the description, or enjoy the full video. NSFW. The time I closed my school with my shit. Yes, you read the title correctly. And no, I didn't accidentally click the wrong flare. I legitimately made my school get shut down with my shit. I'd make some funny puns, but honestly, I think that sentence stands well enough. But I digress. Let's get into the actual reason you clicked this. My family does not like spicy stuff. My dad could be drinking water, and he'd be like, I love the taste, but it's too spicy. If variety is the spice of life, my mum is scared to do anything other than breathe, and even then, that's too much. Now how does that pertain to this story? I'll get to it, but my mum decided, on a fateful day 2 years ago, that this spicy aversion would stain this family no longer, and we'd order some takeaway, while only eating spicy foods. I can't remember what I ordered, but I remember that it burned a lot. The next day, I was on my way to school, where I kind of needed to drop the kids off at the pool, but it wouldn't be anything I couldn't handle until the end of the day. I mean, it is school law to not shit in the school toilet, so naturally, I was going to try not to shit in the toilet. But it built up fast. By the first lunch, I was debating whether I'd be able to survive. By the second, I was contemplating whether I'd be able to survive passing this food baby. I thought, sod it, my asshole matters more than school rules, and hurried to the nearest toilet, which was on the top floor. Biggest shit of my life. Literally, if I ever decide to do anal, I will never need lubrication ever in my life because that shit did all the stretching that a foot-long schlong could do and more. I tried wiping my ass, but it came back for round 2, tried again, but this shit was not out for the count, and round 3 commenced. By the time I was done, my dung and toilet paper were piled into the toilet, to the point where the toilet water was barely visible. And then I ducked up. Majorly. I flushed the toilet. And the shit and toilet paper did not go down. In fact, the water looked like it was rising. Cue me fleeing the toilet and dashing down to the bottom floor in order to gain a credible alibi. I thought, maybe, just maybe it'll go down eventually. I followed my friends up 1 floor of stairs, and guess what came down to meet us? Yup. Toilet water. Dirty toilet water contaminated with my feces. Came flooding down the staircase. Me and my friends ducking ran from that like it was some highly acidic death water from hell. 5 minutes later, we were all lined up outside, as the teachers explained that some crazy diarrhea lunatic gave the bathroom a good dumping, and in order to clean it, the janitors would need a day. Meaning that schools would be closed for the rest of the day. So, to the teacher who might scroll through this subreddit and never found out who it was. It was me. I shat an earthquake in the school and closed it. And I know you dislike the school system, so please don't give me detention. The teacher accidentally pepper-sprayed the class. One day, there was a student that brought a pepper spray that looked like perfume to school. One guy told this to the class teacher, and she confiscated it and left it on the teacher's desk. When we changed periods, she forgot to take the spray and left it on the table. When the next teacher came, she said there is an odor, our class is next to the toilet. Then she used the perfume and sprayed it all over the class. We tried to stop her, but it was too late. We had to evacuate our class that day. How my dorm turned into a drug superhighway. The year was 2012, and we were all supposed to die in December. It was my freshman year of college. I was settling in quite well. I made friends with a bunch of people in our residence hall. We hit it off immediately. We started going out on the weekends, starting with Thirsty Thursday, which turns out is actually a thing. I had more than one roommate. We lived in a 4-person suite with 2 bedrooms. I had a full ride to my university, so I had a lot of extra money to spend on my living arrangements and meal plan. Oh yeah, I was also a huge pothead. I made friends with the dealer on my floor and started buying him extra meals in exchange for weed. That's when one of my roommates came to me with a proposition. He asked me if I knew what bitcoins were. I did not. He explained the virtual currency and how it worked. Then he laid it all out. He told me that he had quite a lot of bitcoins and that he wants to get into selling weed. It all sounded great, but I wasn't sure what he needed me for. He then told me that he doesn't really talk to anyone and that he always sees me with people and goes to parties every weekend. Okay, this makes sense. He told me how the operation would work, and it sounded swell. For the record, I was 18 and very stupid. Anyway, he would purchase the drugs from the Silk Road, a dark website where you can buy literally ducking anything. Our friend Noah would then get the goods delivered to his apartment, which had a mailroom with hundreds of mailboxes. This was good because it would be just a little bit less suspicious. Also, his apartment was not on our campus. Then we'd package everything there and move it to our dorm, which had its own security. We lived in North Philadelphia, so the security and police were always looking out for the students. After we safely had the products, I would find the buyers. Our first shipment went well. We ordered a half-pound of weed, a gram of hash, 10 hits of LSD, a small bag of opium, for us, and 1,000 milligrams of alprazolam extract for my roommate's personal anxiety treatment. We got into this business to become weed salesmen. That weed took forever to sell. Everyone who sold weed already had good connections from their hometowns. The LSD, though, sold in 5 ducking minutes to one buyer who was interested in buying much more than 10 hits. He asked us if we could sell him a couple of hundred tabs. He said he'd pay $350 for each sheet of 100. We looked at the price per sheet on the Silk Road. It would cost us only $80 each. Yes, sir, we can absolutely sell you a couple of sheets. We told him we'd call him when it arrived. Later that night we brewed some opium tea and celebrated entering the LSD business. We bought the sheets for him, and we also bought 2 extras in case anyone else wanted some. The next shipment came with no problems. Our friend came over and bought the sheets we had promised him. We made nearly $800 on that deal. We thought that was a lot, so we celebrated. Later that same day, while smoking a blunt in our courtyard, I made friends with some art students. They invited me to their dorm on the 3rd floor. I agreed, went with them, and we listened to music and painted the walls of the dorm room, which was super against the rules. They started talking about how they had taken magic mushrooms 2 weeks before and how it was life-changing. I told them I had 200 hits of acid in my room. I've never seen people get so excited in my entire life. They bought all of it. They paid $400 for each sheet. Seemingly out of nowhere we made $600. Again, we thought this was a lot. My roommate was really happy with my networking abilities. Dude, I was just getting high with some hipster art students. I didn't really possess the networking skills that everyone thought I had. We went online and purchased another 5 sheets. We started getting a bit more confident in our ability to sell this magic money-making paper. That week I was in one of my classes and had to do a group project with a kid named Eddie. We went to his apartment to work on the project after class. Eddie had an apartment off campus because he was an upperclassman. On the way, he asked if I smoked weed. Of course. He said he had something to show me. When we got there, he showed me a small weed plant he was growing. It was an adorable little plant in a flower pot by the window. I asked if he needed any weed and he said that he did not. We smoked a bit and then she offered me a Xanax. I had never taken Xanax, so I googled the pill he offered me. Alprazolam. Huh, that's funny. I told him I had 1,000 milligrams of alprazolam in my room. This excited him. I asked my roommate if he was willing to sell some of his private stashes. Eddie only wanted to buy around 100 milligrams. He agreed and I brought Eddie to my dorm. We gave it to him for the cool price of $150, a slick markdown from what he was paying. After all, we hadn't even planned on selling that stuff. He asked how we got it so cheap and if we could get anything else. We told him that we sell LSD. He said he loves hallucinogens and would love to purchase a sheet, so he did. 4 sheets left. If we sell them, we can get a new and faster computer. The weekend came and I was hanging out with 2 of my friends from our residence hall. Joe, who was really chill and loved smoking weed as much as I did. And Bianca, who was so cool that it frightened me. She was really intimidating. I had a huge crush on her, but she was talking to a kid that lived in Johnson and Hardwick Hall. Bianca was the type of person you see in movies about cool kids doing cool things. A character who has a lot of depth, but it takes nearly the whole movie to slowly peel back the layers, and by that time you're in love. I told her if we sold the rest of our acid, I'd buy her a new tattoo. She was covered in them. That night Joe was going to take us to his friend Jamie's house. We were going to try cocaine for the first time. I was terrified. Not only was I terrified about trying cocaine, but I was scared of doing it with Bianca. I just didn't know how I would act, and I didn't want to do something stupid. We arrived at Jamie's house. Jamie was also intimidating. His house was what your typical trap house looked like at the time, with a bunch of really expensive music equipment. Everybody wanted to be a rapper or a DJ that year. He introduced all his friends and offered us lines of coke. Here we go. Joe went first, he'd already done some before. Bianca went next without hesitation. Now it was my turn. I remember my hand shaking with the rolled up bill between my fingers. I chose the smallest line and sniffed. It did not taste anything like I expected. 5 minutes went by. Oh, this is what cocaine is like. It was so underwhelming. It was also some thoroughly stepped on shit. I know that now because since then I've done some foreign blow that almost made my heart stop. Anyway, Jamie and I got to talking, mostly about his music career. Jamie told me if I ever wanted to buy cocaine in bulk to hit him up. I laughed and told him if he ever wanted to buy LSD in bulk to hit me up. I was half joking. He looked at me with the straightest face and asked if I was serious. Honestly, this Jamie guy scared the shit out of me. He was a good 10 inches taller than me and the whole scene was starting to freak me out. I told him I was serious though. He told me to come with him. He brought me into his room and closed the door. In the room it was quiet. The walls were soundproofed. I looked around and the room was full of money, cocaine, and guns. Okay, he's probably not going to kill me. I hope. He then asked about my LSD connection. I told him I could get sheets for $350. He said he wanted books. Books? Does this guy want books? I didn't know this at the time, but a book is 1,000 hits of LSD. I told him I had to talk to some people, and I would let him know the price, but that I could make it happen. We went back to the party, and he gave me line after line of cocaine. Joe offered him money for the lines, but Jamie told him not to pay. He said your friend here bought you guys as much coke as you want for the night. Honestly, that made me feel really cool. After the party, I talked to my roommate and told him what happened. We looked up the price of a book on the Silk Road, $300. Not only could we have saved a lot of money if we had just bought a book from the start, but we were going to make a lot more money selling by the book. The days of getting excited over $800 were about to come to an abrupt end. I talked to Jamie and asked how much he would be willing to pay for each book. He said he would pay no more than $3,000 for each book. We decided we would sell him the books for $2,800 each. He agreed and asked how many we had. I said we can start with 5 books. He agreed. This was perfect. Not only were we about to make more money than we had ever expected, but the acid was incredibly easy to ship. They were basically sheets of paper. Our supplier used to send it to us in between the pages of large children's coloring books. The books, or prints, as our supplier called them, blended with the kids' books very well. Our prints consisted of a large picture of Bart Simpson, the Grateful Dead Bears, and a double rainbow portrait. If you didn't know what acid was, you wouldn't know these were drugs. We made nearly $14,000 from that first deal. Over the course of a few months, we would sell close to 30,000 hits of LSD. We had $75,000 in cash sitting in an empty bedroom at Noah's apartment. I stopped going to class. My roommate had filled his entire room with computer parts and instruments. Noah, well, we didn't see him much, but he was always present when we needed a shipment. We broke our cardinal rule of not getting high on our own supply. We took a lot of acids that semester. It was an extremely enlightening period for us. Things in my world began to take on entirely new meaning. I had a newfound appreciation for things I had never noticed. The connections with my friends became very strong and we talked about a lot of stuff that was just too deep for my other peers to even scratch the surface of. It was nice. By my birthday in February, we had over $200,000 in cash. We didn't die in December, not that I thought we would, but some people were legitimately surprised. They were mostly art students. Things started getting a little crazy. We always told ourselves we would only sell LSD. We had sparked a huge psychedelic scene in and around Philadelphia. There were literally parties where everyone was tripping acid. Many groups of people began taking acid and doing creative stuff that I admired so much. So much good music and art was around during that period. I felt like I was living in San Francisco in the middle 60s. It felt like we were part of this incredible scene that nobody outside of the city knew about. Of course, every wave has to break and roll back. It was getting close to the summer. I hadn't been to class in months. We hadn't seen Noah since the previous shipment about a month prior. It was a regular weekday, but I wasn't going to class, so I took 2 hits of acid. I spent most of that evening and night writing and yapping into my tape recorder. I was on the subject of togetherness and how there are so many things that are so incredible that we never notice even though they're right in front of us. Acid talk. I was looking at a glass of water, thinking about its importance, and how so many of us take it for granted. That's when my roommate came home. This was my roommate though. Remember, we had a 2-bedroom, 4-person suite. My roommate, who was never involved in our operation. He was obliterated, and not from alcohol. This was something else. He limped into the room and collapsed on the bed. I immediately got the rest of my roommates together. That's when Christian told me what transpired earlier while I was locked in the bedroom tripping acid. He told me that my roommate had broken up with his girlfriend, took an entire bottle of lorazepam, and tried to cut his leg open with my biology scalpel. What the duck? I examined his leg, and he did not try to cut it open, he succeeded. He had a gigantic cut all the way down his lower leg that was fixed up by his father, who is a surgeon. His father then brought him back to the dorm. The condition he was in was terrifying. He was breathing, but not well. His heart rate was also very low and we had to monitor him for the remainder of the night, taking shifts to make sure he didn't stop breathing. I couldn't believe his father had brought him back in the condition he was in. The next morning, I was exhausted. My roommate and I, the one with the bitcoins, left and went to Noah's apartment to relax for an hour. While we were gone, Bianca was to watch over him with her roommate. When we got to Noah's, we had a new problem. Noah hadn't gotten out of bed for what looked like weeks. He had run out of his antidepressants and was in bad shape. At this point, I checked out. I walked into the living room and opened a bottle of champagne. I poured a glass, popped a Xanax, and sat on the sofa. I was still a little foggy from my acid trip and I hadn't slept all night. That's when my phone rang. It was Bianca. I answered the phone, and her first words were, "Your room is full of police." Well, it's been a good run. On my desk were a couple of thousand hits of LSD and a handgun. In the other bedroom were numerous unopened boxes of expensive computer parts, scales and drug paraphernalia galore, and a large pile of white powdered alprazolam. That room also smelled heavily of weed because there was a half-pound out in the open. We had gotten very sloppy. I asked her if my roommate was okay. She said that's why the police are there. She said his mom was trying to reach him and he wasn't answering her, so she called the police for a wellness check. Bianca then started talking to someone and hung up the phone. We pondered whether or not to flee the country and become outlaws. We did, after all, have all the cash here at Noah's. Close to $1 million. Maybe more. Because we were getting sloppy, we had also started selling hash, Xanax, LSD, 25-INBOME, 2CB, 2CI, 2CE, mescaline, cocaine, MDMA, MDA, LSA, clonazepam, Ativan, and other various designer drugs. We were going down for a long time. I started thinking about my life. It was flashing before my eyes. I thought about my high school crush, and how I should have been more upfront with her about how much I liked her. I loved her. I thought about the time we slept in the same bed, and I couldn't fall asleep because I couldn't believe she was lying next to me. I remembered how I never wanted to wake up next to anyone else. I thought about my trivial crush on Bianca and how shallow it really was. I thought about my parents and how they'd raised me better. How they did so much for me so that I could go away to college and have a better life than they had. I thought about sitting on the beach last summer without a care in the world. The problems in my life that seemed hilarious now. Will I go to prom? Is my car cool enough? My K/D ratio in Call of Duty. How could so much happen in less than a year? That's when Bianca called me again. I was terrified to pick up that phone. We looked outside to see if police were surrounding the apartment complex. They were not. I answered the phone. She said the police were gone. She had put my gun and LSD in my desk drawer. The police never entered the other bedroom. It was just a wellness check. An ambulance came and took my roommate. He was going to be okay. I hugged my partner in crime and we cried. I wish I could tell you we cleaned up our lives after that. My roommate with the bitcoins developed a really dangerous drug habit after that. He spent most of his money on drugs over the next few years. I went back to class after that summer but stopped going again because I wanted to party instead and start a career as a writer. I failed college. Throughout the years I went on many adventures all around the world. I have hundreds of stories, I just have to write them. Oh, and I have to learn how to write properly. I don't use a lot of drugs today, and I don't encourage people to use drugs. I have unfortunately lost many friends during the opiate epidemic. Weed is cool though, I like weed. I wouldn't tell people to smoke it, but I'll never shame someone for enjoying some cannabis. I don't shame people for anything, it's just not my place to judge anyone. Feel free to judge me though, about how my dorm room became a drug superhighway. TLDR. We sold some acid, created a psychedelic scene in Philadelphia, and almost got caught.
Like and subscribe for more ducking content.